of digital transformation continues for many of us, the questions around why and what we are transforming has become prevalent across many, many boardrooms. This is a critical factor in the development of our future technologies. It has become imperative for a technology leader to be able to communicate the ambition behind any transformation process and also to be able to share the value both operationally as well as to the bottom line. Whilst recent events may have acted as a catalyst for technology change and advancement for many, it is now essential for businesses to question themselves about what the drivers are for transformational change and how it will positively impact on their business. This panel discussion will discuss the key ingredients that might be considered when planning transformation, the importance of implementing mindset and culture, and how these developments will support and future-proof our businesses. We're going to share the questions out amongst the panel. Now, first of all, the first question, Graeme will take the first lead on that, and then Kanika. So first question, how have external drivers impacted your transformation journey, and what have you done differently as a result?
Morning, everyone. I mean, it's been a challenge, hasn't it? I think, hopefully try and keep away from some of the subject that's been done to death about what happened to COVID and what everybody did. But it has impacted how we're operating. I think there's no doubt about it. That speed to make change, you know, we all had to make change. We had to rip up the rule book, and we demonstrated we could do things a lot quicker. I think that really puts, particularly in my position, it put a lot of focus on why some of the projects took maybe longer than they should have done. Let's put it that way, and why the speed to value was so slow. I think that's definitely changed the way we're looking at things, and I think it's really changed the way we're trying to assess where we want to move forward and how we want to move forward. There's been a real impetus of interested parties, shall we say, in what we're doing. So, you know, there was always the business strategy and a transformation strategy and an IT strategy that was sort of blending together. I think now we're looking at more of a holistic view of what is the approach, what are we trying to do, and how can technology help us? So from that point, what I've tried to do is re-look at what we're doing, re-look at how we attempt our transformation. There's no doubt that we moved forward with our overall plan, but we also did a lot more at the same time. So why do we need to change that approach? How can we not try and drive more value in the future? And there was always a lot of business-led transformational change. That's kind of just how it needs to be. But we've tried to pivot more. In the last few months, we've set up what we're classifying as a customer-led transformation. So we've set up, I've got my digital SLT, which is our leadership team, doing architecture, development, delivery, all those normal type activities. But over and above that, we've set up this transformation SLT that includes, you know, the director of customer experience, the business change leads, transformation, and driving all that in together into a prioritization funnel, I think I will call it. So that the power has shifted from it being the different lines of business feeding into what the transformation should be, to try and really shift that back to what are we trying to do as a company? You know, putting the customer at the heart of what we're trying to do. That's Covea's strategy. Why is that not then our transformation strategy? And it's taken some real push, I'll be honest, to get people to move their mindset to that. But I just look back to think, you know, in 2 years ago, contact centres. How many of you did you phone up a contact centre and they said, oh, we can't deal with you because of COVID? Oh, we've got staff. I was on the phone to an insurance company that's not our insurance company 2 weeks ago, and they've still got that same phone message saying, oh, we can't be able to help you. Well, that's my read of it anyway. And you're thinking, that's a really poor excuse, isn't it? How did you put the customer so low down on your priority that you were more interested in just deflecting than ingraining that? And that, to me, is a big piece of why we're looking at it from a customer perspective, because as you all know, if you haven't got a happy customer, you're not going to make any money. I mean, regardless, you might do it for a short period, but that's going to blend over time. So, yeah, really leading on that customer-led transformation, pulling the business units in, but putting that mirror up and saying, and I guess when I talk about customer, I'm not talking about just external customers, I'm talking about internal customers too. Everybody's a customer. You know, if our contact centre staff are having a bad time, they'll have a bad time with the customer. So, you know, I don't think it's rocket science. I don't think it's too out there, but I'm not seeing a lot of other people doing that. I think over time, hopefully, we'll start to blend into it. So that's definitely our approach.
Yeah, absolutely critical in the fact of growing a business and developing that business going forward. Kanika, same question to yourself.
Yeah, I was thinking that kind of thinking about kind of COVID, I suppose thinking about kind of those external factors, I think it's quite easy to dismiss how many external factors. So I suppose when I kind of reflecting on this, I was thinking, cost of living crisis, COVID, Black Lives Matter, reckoning with race, all of these kind of, fuel costs, all of that, and, combined with COVID, almost kind of, I think, fundamentally changed the why. I think there's something about, suddenly technology becoming the way in which you get in touch with your doctor, the way in which you, work and fundamentally run your business, the way in which you engage with work and are able to pay your bills. I think it's really, from a transformation perspective, that shift in thinking around going, actually, as you said, technology is not, and it's not in a dusty room that some person sits in the dark and does a thing. I think that the expectation from the organisation, so University of Sheffield, where I was throughout the kind of pandemic, actually really shifted, and I think that was really fascinating, because I think that the thought process around driving that clarity of goal and clarity of mission kind of really shifts what people want. And actually, I think we found a real kind of shift to thinking about what the real kind of benefit was for the customer, as you've said, but also people got a bit more demanding. It was a little bit more, can I have the sexy stuff, and can I have this, and can I have that? And I think actually, from a transformation perspective, that became a really interesting challenge, where first of all, people were used to just doing things in a way that was just them kind of wandering off, and it wasn't all kind of pulled together. But actually suddenly going, actually the technology is a critical part of our delivering our core service, is a completely different mindset for someone to arrive at the table with. So actually, significant changes that we found were in kind of reshaping kind of co-creation and how co-creation is done. So obviously kind of methodology, which we were talking about earlier this morning as being not everything. But that idea of, we need to create the right bit of tech, we need to deliver that so that you can deliver what you need to do as a service. And I think, we spent a long time in a tech space quite siloed. And I think the requirement for us to kind of get that right became more important as people realised how important we would be for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key point there, customer and demand, for me, are two of the critical factors that we should be looking at going forwards. And a nice example came up when you talked about going to the doctors. For me, it was the dentist. My personal dentist, or my local dentist, they've changed completely. I drive to the surgery, and I don't go in until I've filled in a form online, until it's reconnected back to me. Fantastic ideas. And they thought about this because they knew they couldn't have too many people in their surgery, and they wanted it as quickly as possible. So your appointment was vital to you as the customer, and it was a great example. It just came to my mind as you were speaking there, Kanika, so thank you for that. Second question. Kanika, I'd like you to take this one first, if you wouldn't mind. Do you believe these external drivers could be viewed as a benefit and help drive transformation, or do you feel that perhaps they just helped accelerate the roadmap that was already there?
I feel like I should just answer yes. Yes. I suppose I would say, in the sense of how it specifically in the organisations I've been in, I think that it did accelerate it, increased demand. People wanted more. I think the challenge with that was actually, I think there's a lot of organisations who, I've been in a number of places where, if historically people have underinvested in their technology, what they want is the stuff that comes out of a really good infrastructure and really having the ability and agility to change. And I think the really interesting bit about that is that moment where people go, well, I really want online chat. And you go, you are 5 years away from being able to really even get there. And I think that actually from a transformation perspective, and I think about it as a kind of from a technical perspective, and as a technical leader, there's a responsibility to help people to do their housework and to help them get on that roadmap so they can understand what that future should look like. And I think, in the sense of, how it has helped, I think it definitely has helped. We've come out of the dusty office and we're now at the table. But I think that there's something about helping people to be pragmatic, because actually not every leader is a technical leader, and that's all right. But actually there's a responsibility to find that balance, so that people can understand what what they need to do that won't deliver kind of benefit from a customer perspective tomorrow, but actually will set them up so that they're ready to do the big stuff, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And I think that the real kind of, wake-up call is that I think that there needs to be a shock in some organisations around going, these are the consequences of underinvestment, and let's just lean into the uncomfortableness of that. I think that that's really critical, because actually, we want to be able to support organisations to do and deliver their core offering, and you can't if you don't do the boring stuff first. No one wants to do a big integration project, but sometimes you have to do that.
Absolutely, thank you. Graeme?
Obviously agree. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, I think it's changed. It's changed some focus in some ways. I mean, we were doing a massive transformation, replatforming all our core systems, our enterprise architecture, everything. And in some ways, we were lucky because we had done some of those horrible nuts and bolts bits that don't show value straight away. But obviously, you can't do anything without them. But it was always about the platform. What platform are you doing? What's this platform? What's that? And it's a 5-year plan. And I struggled with 5-year plans at the best of times. And now it's just demonstrated how ridiculous that is. So I think it's that pivot that I find really good. Is now about what specifically is it you're trying to achieve and how can we do that? Don't tell me what platform you want, because I really don't like it. But tell me what it is that you're trying to achieve and can we stitch something together? I mean, online chat's great. We had a web chat stuff that we'd set up, and guess what? Nobody looked after it. So we delivered it, and they're like, well, it doesn't work. Because as soon as the phone started ringing, everybody started to answer the phone. It's like, no, this is the moment you spend more time with the bot, it'll learn. Yeah, Graeme, but look, the phone's ringing and someone's got to answer it. Okay, so now people have started to understand that they need to integrate with it and they need to accept the platform, the elements of it, and that you can take the pieces chunk by chunk, and it's the data that we're extracting from it that's important. So I think it's helped people's mindset pivot from it being, here's a technology solution, to we've got technology solutions, how can we get the most value from them, and what's the change that needs to happen to enable that? I mean, it's always the way, isn't it? The technology is the easy part. It's the people, it's the processes, it's changing the mindset that's really important. And that, I think, is really, I've seen it from the last couple of years, has accelerated that massively, that it's not just a technology problem. This is a people problem. And if we don't articulate that in the right way and show real value, then the transformation is never going to be successful anyway. But I think it's put that into a stark contrast. And it's made more people interested. You sit on an exec and people are talking about technology, not the detail of it, but why it's important, and they're championing it. I mean, the more I get more and more requests for more and more technology. And actually, it's not technology we need. It's just like utilising what we've got, and it's changing how we operate. So I think there's been lots of real positive stuff, but equally that comes at great cost as well because you can't do everything.
I think that's an interesting point just to finish that question on, is that prioritisation. You have a stack, and my personal experience at Liverpool was a stack of requests coming through, growing all the time, but nobody really understood what the business benefit was going to be from them. Which one do we do first? Is there a natural order that we have to do them in, or can you be selective? And one of the things I saw when COVID hit is a change in mindset of the board that I was reporting into. They started to realise just how important it was to be very clear about what they were trying to achieve. What was the most important thing for them, for the business, and how do you then deliver it? And I like the point you just made around the people and the process. So a little mantra for me was strategy, policy, people, process, and technology. The technology is fifth in that list for a reason, because quite often you've got the stuff you need, you just need to use it. And that could be a culture change issue, it could be a training issue, but getting those things in a priority list that you need to then deliver on. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to question 3. I'm not sure whether we'll get Peter in today, but we'll see.
Question. We can carry on.
There's so much to say, don't worry about it.
So question 3, I think this is your favourite, this one, Kanika. How do we define success in our business? So it links into what I've just said around what's that business strategy, what you're trying to achieve, and what are our key measures in doing that? So if I could go to, Graeme, could you take that one again first, and I'll move on to Kanika.
Of course. So, I mean, metrics. I'm not going to spend hours talking about metrics because you'd all fall asleep. But I mean, obviously metrics are important because if you don't measure what you're doing, how do you know you've been successful? But we've pushed a huge amount recently on the prioritisation and the business value. I mean, all our projects were done on, here's a business case, Always about growth, always about winning huge amounts of new business, and then we quite often didn't win that amount of business, and the business case didn't really flow properly. So we're measuring ourselves on our technical delivery based on a business case that we have no influence over. I'm like, how does that work? My team were really sad. We've just delivered something really quickly, really well, no issues on it at all, and yet it's not successful. It's not deemed successful. So done a lot of work around KRIs, looking at key risk indicators and blending it out that we're looking at service. So what's the cost of service in that platform? What's the cost of the fact it's out of support and I have to go on eBay to get parts for it versus this new shiny thing that's really good? Looking at things and just been a bit more honest, I think, about where we are, getting the risk team involved, looking at the cost of contracts, all these different parameters that we're looking at, how much tech debt, what's the decommissioning plan on that, and we are prioritising based on that just as much as the customer experience, what's the impact to the customer. And then finally we get down to the business change piece. And first of all, it's the people business change. And the last thing, the bottom around business change is, well, what actually are we going to get from an efficiency saving? Because if the rest of it adds up, this bit should be really sensible. But there's so much value in that we haven't had before. We haven't been prioritising on it. And then I've got systems that are sagging, but I've got some brand new stuff over here that's got no workload on it, but it's really, really good. It's just not balanced. And I think that's really changed, I think, in our approach. It's given people a lot more foresight into it. When you've got a P1 and the platform's broken and it's got 90% of the policies on it, and this one that's lovely that you've spent multiple millions of pounds on doesn't have any problems, it's quite easy to say, I'm taking that now as you need to help me prioritise properly. It's put it into stark contrast. So trying to use metrics in a way that are helpful without being overwhelmed by them, I think, is something we've been really driving forward to. It's just that repeatability, reusability. We're doing a lot of work with microservices and repeatable, reusable bits of technology. It's like, can we move that and put it somewhere else? What metrics did we drive from this bit? Can we put it across the rest of the business now with repeatable information? So I think it's just changing the landscape. It's obviously much less about technology. I think much more just about being a business leader and seeing it from a commercial perspective.
I think that's the important point there in the question. It's, what are our key measures? At the hour, is that technology or is that the business? So Kanika, if we could hand that to you. Thanks, Peter. Welcome.
So I suppose I'd say, do you want to do an intro first?
Okay, yeah. So I'd like to introduce Peter Adams, stuck in the Manchester traffic. So historically, I knew exactly what that meant. So I can sympathise with you.
Never drive into a city.
Get the train. So we got a couple of questions left for yourself. So this one we're on at the moment is, how do we define success in our businesses, and what are our key measures in that? So Kanika, if I could ask you, then I'll come to you, Peter, if that's okay.
Yeah, so this isn't my favourite question, as Graeme's already implied. I think in part because in a previous life I did a lot of benefit management. And I suppose, to my view, I'd agree with what you've said. I suppose I would kind of, stepping back from that, see it from a wider organisational perspective, whereby I think that there's always an ambition to be able to measure the success of transformation. But actually, you can't measure the success of transformation until you actually understand the performance of the organisation. I think a lot of organisations struggle to understand where they are right now, and I think that's it's almost a critical dependency to be able to really understand what you've changed if you don't know where you are. And it sounds really simple and basic, but actually it's revolutionary if you walk in and go, well, what do you do, and how does that work, and what does that then mean? I think the other bit that I think probably is one of the challenges is, I think often when you're in a tech space and working as we have been doing in the past, there's a leaning towards wanting to celebrate the kind of output. So we have a go live and we all go, yes, and we're all really excited because we've got the tech out. But actually the celebration should be when actually it enables the value, and that's the longer run, and it's a little bit boring. And from a performance perspective around understanding success and really getting that return on investment, surely we would be celebrating when the efficiency lands, or the customers love it and they give us that feedback. And I think I suppose I'd say, yes, it's about understanding those key measures, but I think it's also about that change of mindset around, what is transformation for, and subsequently, when should we be all putting on the party hats and going for a drink, would be my view.
Okay. Peter, over to you.
I have to agree. The first challenge, obviously, is how you measure success individually as an organisation. And equally, we tend to celebrate the result. We got live, we got it done, we've gone live with a system change, we've enabled something to happen, and then we celebrate and get on with the work, and then the work tells you 9 months later that it didn't quite land, didn't quite succeed, and it's all the things we didn't think about now come out of the woodwork of didn't ask that question because we all assumed that it's challenging that you measure success by the outcomes for all stakeholders, not just those in the moment. It's key to focus on what we were trying to do, not what we were trying to deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, for me, is a key factor, that it's not just the success of the IT team. Without the success of the business, there's no success in there. And measuring that overall business, let's not take a tumble off the edge there. Yeah, that wouldn't be helpful. Yes, I think there's some great points. And these 3 questions, I think, have linked together in that. So it's starting to pull together. In my mind, it's about how IT works more closely with the business, with the boards. And the next question is, we all know board buy-in to implementing new projects is key. Do we feel that our boards and other senior leadership understand the journey and end goal? And are these 2 things mutually exclusive, or do we believe they are aligned as needed? On this question, I'd like Peter, would you take that one first for me?
I think it's twofold. You tend to have boards that understand where we're going, but don't appreciate the minutiae or indeed have an interest in the minutiae of how we get there. And they tend to be focused on a quarterly return, the quarterly progress, a statement of the business, and as a result, their attention to a longer term change can waver. That they focus on this month's numbers, this quarter's numbers, the challenges in the market that just happened, and then the attention to the transformation can drift away a little bit until they hear of problems. IT can sometimes be overzealous in committing what's possible, what we can build, because I work in IT, I've worked in IT a long time, and I know I can build it. Just give me the money and the time, and I'll build you whatever you want. And the need to be, we can get it done, we'll get it done, we'll get it sorted, we'll work the hours, do the weekends, do the late nights, and miss on the, it's still a change, and it changes people, and the majority of those people are business resources who have a different focus. They're on a deliver the day's numbers, deliver the week's numbers. So there's a challenge there sometimes that we can overcommit and then not be forthright about what's actually expected of the whole business to achieve a change, not just what's expected of an IT function and a set of IT resources to deliver part of a change, because ultimately we build a system, but we don't make the music. We're not in that draconian space, so it's the challenge is to make sure they understand actually delivering a change means changing how people operate, which is problematic in many instances, and the system enables them to do it differently, doesn't make them.
In the context of the board buy-in, are there any in your personal experience, any things that you could share that have helped you to improve that buy-in?
The critical things have been having ownership and accountability for the outcomes in the broader scale with the board and not with the IT function.
Right.
Because then it becomes, in my interest, I'm required to deliver a CRM go live. If I can deliver that, that's pretty straightforward. I've got to deliver 20% markup on sales. That's a sales director's problem. And really the change will be sales only get 20% by getting a CRM system. Yeah. And now we're joined at the hip because I only succeed if he gets his 20%. I'm not succeed if I get his CRM. Yeah. And that's been monumentally changing the executive because then, we've got to really commit to it. We can't do 7 things. We can't have another initiative because I've just seen something in the paper that looks interesting. I've got to stick to the path. Yeah. And you have that commitment from the exec and their teams and therefore IT. And we're all then rowing in the same boat rather than us trying to chase a path and then joining in when they feel it's convenient, often if it is looking good, and disappearing when it's looking bad.
Often the case. Kanika, can I pass that one over to you now?
Yeah, I would agree. I'm going to try and disagree on the next question. Is there a next question? I'll disagree on that one. I think that thing around accountability is probably the crux of it. I think there's also that thing about, my view is that boards, like organisations, are due a bit of a revolution. From the perspective of, I think that my personal view is that all organisations really are tech organisations, And I think that it's an uncomfortable truth. And I think there's a lot of people who are unconfident and afraid at that board level of showing curiosity and being in a space of learning around kind of what is this and how does it work. But there's a balance between showing curiosity and knowing that your goal is to get the business outcome and understanding it from that perspective. And then, your director of sales now seconding as your solutions architect, which isn't great either.
Not viable.
Yeah, not viable and not what they were here to do. And I suppose at the end of the day, I think that there's a responsibility. I think on a number of sides, but I suppose from a tech perspective, my personal view is that I think a lot of technical leaders have defaulted to going, well, tech's really complicated, so don't let me go there with you, and it's all going to black box it. So you just come and ask me later how that goes. And I think there's a power in that. There's a power in tech leaders going, it's real complex, so let me not fuddle you with that. You just go away and do this bit. Whereas I think there's a balance between the two where we stop going, it's a black box, it is really exciting, and I'm hoping that it's going to give you what you want, but we need to work out how to do that. And I think that partnership with the balance being in the right way means that actually people are able to focus on what is the business outcome coming out from it. But I think there's a kind of relearning of that relationship with the board particularly. And I think that what's core to that is, I think, reflecting on that, I do a couple of NED positions, is I think real clarity around appetite for risk. I think risk is absolutely critical to be understood at a board level, so that actually you can do your kind of fail fast in the places where people are okay with that. Because I think there's a number of places where boards aren't all right with that, they aren't okay with the risk, or they are, or they're okay with the board's all right with the risk, but the organisation isn't, and then there's a complete disconnect. Yeah. So I think there's a combination of things. I think it's about risk, I think it's about us building a new relationship, and I think it is about that accountability.
Thank you. Graeme?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Boards are interesting places to be, and there's always a lot of covering yourself to ensure that you said, minuted, that I thought that was a bad idea, or there's risk involved in that. And inherently, any transformation is highly risky, particularly if you're trying to disrupt a business model. You don't know if you're going to get it right, do you? Hence why you're trying to disrupt it, you're trying to change things. I get lots of scrutiny over some of the things that we're doing. I agree. You've got to take shared ownership, because I can deliver something. If I deliver it and no one uses it, absolutely, I haven't achieved anything. Or I have, but I've achieved it on my own, and what's the point? You shouldn't be representing a part of the company if you're on your own. So I do think there's a lot around that, but I think it's education. I agree with you. The boards have to change. I mean, I work in an old-fashioned industry, so the board's probably old-fashioned in approach as well. No one will hear that, but the way they look at things is really risk-based, and I can't quantify some of the risk. I can't quantify whether the plan's going to work. I can't quantify, what's going to happen and what people's appetite is going to be, and what that change of direction is. So I think it's trying to just be really open and honest, really transparent. And I always think you're right. You can't say it's a black box. Well, if you can, it's a short-lived journey. If you can't explain it, I kind of think you're not doing a particularly great job, and you're not particularly good at your position. If you have to revert back to, well, tech's complicated, you wouldn't understand it. Well, really? I think that's probably not entirely true. Yeah, maybe the inner workings of an ML model might be quite complicated, but no one's really at that level should be so naive enough not to understand that if you get the data, I can manipulate it and give you an answer that makes you money. I mean, I think it's down to us to educate people and showcase them that a transformation is exciting, but it is inherently risky, and it needs broader buy-in of the exec. I think that's the place where I start, is trying to ensure the rest of the exec are fully bought in. I'm not going there on my own. I might be the only one talking about technology, but I'm talking about it for the sake of that part of the business. And I think that's the buy-in. The dynamic, I'm seeing people more bought in, that understand that it's important, but there's also a little bit more of, well, Graeme said that, so, you might be right, you might be wrong, let's see. I'm like, no, let's together go forward. So it's about, I think it's getting closer and taking the board on that journey with you.
I think that's the critical point there. There's the common purpose, whether you're IT, whether you're sales, or whether you're the board, it's that common purpose, but also that common language. so that you're talking the same language, and it means that you're understanding it's the business language, not just the IT language or the accounting language. And then finally, a confidence coming out of this conversation, a confidence in the technical teams to be able to position with the board and say, if you don't do this, this is going to be the impact, this is going to be the risk you're going to carry. We can start to identify some of those technical risks that then transpose into a business risk. But it's having the confidence to be able to position that with our boards and feel as if you're being listened to. I think that's a critical factor. And our final question for each of you, finally, what do you believe are the true fundamentals of transformation? And why? And a soundbite from each of you, if I may ask. Can I start with Kanika, please?
Oh, I get to go first. True fundamentals, I'd say, I mean, this is all going to be it is a soundbite, isn't it?
That's fine.
Understand where you are and clarity of goal of where you want to get to. So my fundamentals of transformation would be, there's a Backstreet Boys song called, I think, and it goes, tell me, I want it that way, and then the IT team go, tell me why. You just go, tell me why, all the time. I think that's the fundamentals of transformation, well, why? You know?
So that's 7 times you're allowed to ask the why question. Peter.
Probably 2 thoughts come to mind. Firstly, the big one is that transformation is the continuum.
Yeah.
We are no longer in a place where we can do something and live on it for 30 years. We have to continue to evolve and change, and we should expect that, and the businesses need to recognise that. And the other thought that always comes to mind is a comedy sketch from Billy Connolly where he uses very choice language to describe change. And I want it this way, I want it that way, and keep up, because I'll be changing my mind as you're going along.
Absolutely.
It's a choice 2 minutes of very direct
Profanities.
English language. But it just describes change in a nutshell, that if it is going to happen, it's going to happen with you or without, it's going to happen to you and for you, and it won't be what you thought it was going to be.
Absolutely.
And pay attention, because it'll be different to what I asked for originally.
Yes.
We've all experienced boards who've changed the direction of where they wanted it to be, despite the fact we've already left the harbour and are plowing along quite nicely.
It was ever thus. And finally, Graeme.
Value, I think, really. Short-term value, long-term value, process improvement, automation, new platform, whatever it is, value, just value. I think that's what I'm pushing really hard on. Whether it's an update to a website, does it deliver some value? Yes, right, let's go out and celebrate that. It doesn't have to be these big fundamental chunks. I think it's just continuous value. And if you can show that, guess what? You're probably going to stay in a job. If you can't, you're probably not. And there's no end to the transformation. We are transforming. We're always going to be transforming. And the sooner people realise that, then it's just life. Probably don't need a transformation title anymore. We're just doing our job. That's probably what I'd say, which is delivering value.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks to all 3 of you. So thank you for your attention. I think we're just about on time. We've started a little bit later, but I think we've picked up some time there. So could you join me thanking our panel for their